So today we are going to start a tumble on some amethyst. Now this has actually been running in a vibratory tumbler. We had an accident that we don't want to talk about. The lid had come off, so we just decided to go ahead and clean it out and tumble the old-fashioned way. Amethyst, it is a harder stone, so hopefully we can get through this in 4 weeks. It might be 5 weeks, but for you it'll just be a few minutes. So to get this tumble started, I will fill up my canister about 2/3 of the way full. And the most notable difference in these stones is going to be after this first week. That's when a lot of those rough edges are going to be worn down. I'll find another couple small ones that fill in that gap. So we don't want to overfill it, but we also don't want to underfill it. And we've got some small chips in here we can throw in. So for the first week, we will be putting in a 60 grit silicon carbide. And we put in 2 tablespoons per pound of rock. Now these are 3-pound tumblers. So we just go ahead and assume that we have 3 pounds in there. One of these days we might invest in a scale. So I will be putting in 6 tablespoons. And as you're watching this video, we do have separate tablespoons in each different stage of additive that we use, and that's largely just to prevent cross-contamination, because we don't want to accidentally get a couple pieces of like the 60 grit in with the final polish, because that will essentially ruin the finished product. After that, we will fill this up to the top of the rocks with some good old water. And it's always important to make sure you have this properly seated in there. That way it prevents the water from leaking out. So you don't want to tumble dry. Bubble, bubble. Okay, and then with us, we actually have 4 different tumblers down here, and each of those are double barrel tumblers. So we have 8 barrels of rocks going at any given moment. So it's important for us to go ahead and label what we have in the canister as well as what stage it's at. Although this video might only be about 10 or so minutes for you, it is at least a month long for us. That's all. We're old, we forget stuff. That way we don't have any surprises when we go to open it next week. And then we will check this at least once a day just to make sure we don't have any equipment malfunctions, because that happens too sometimes. And we'll check on it in a week. Alright, so we are done with stage 1 on the amethyst, or at least we hope we are. Amethyst is a harder stone, so sometimes we might have to run it for 2 weeks. Let's see how it did. main things that we're looking for when we're making a determination if we need to run it in stage 1 again or not is if the edges have been knocked down fairly well and no major pitting issues inside the stones themselves. As you can kind of see here, the edges are fairly rounded out on here. So these should be ready to go to stage 2. I'll go ahead and dry a piece off here real quick, that way you can see how it looks when it's dry. So, stones have a tendency, they will look shiny when they're wet. There's still a little bit of water on there, but you can kind of see how much duller that is in comparison to a wet stone. So we will get these ready for stage 2. So for our Amethyst stage 2, we'll be putting in 2 tablespoons per pound of rock of the 180-220 grit. And this is again silicon carbide. And we'll assume that there are 3 pounds of rock in there, so we will be putting in 6 tablespoons. One more. And then just as before, we will put water in up to the top of the rock line. And we'll get this sealed up. It's always important to kind of be careful with the lids on these so you're not accidentally bending them. If it gets too bent up, you're going to get your slurry leaking out when you're mid-tumble. And it's also a good reason to check your tumbles at least once a day when they're going, just to make sure that the machine is still running. So we have had belts break, as well as make sure that there's no leaks going on. Alright, and then we will put a label on here so we know exactly what stone is in here and what stage we're on. And we'll see this in a week. Alright, so we are at the end of our stage 2 on our Amethyst. We are going to probably start recording more in our bathroom because it is getting colder where we're at. When you're doing rock tumbles and having to use an indoor water source, it's extremely important that you do not flush any of the grit down the drain. Main reason for that is the grit and the any of the particles that get knocked off the stones will settle in the P-traps and stuff in your plumbing, and you don't want to have to call a plumber. So we'll be actually rinsing this off in our tub and having the discharge water go into a bucket, and then we'll be dumping the bucket outside. couple pieces off here so you can kind of see how they look when they are dry. So right now it's kind of got the same finish as, if you know what sea glass is. Still slightly kind of opaque finish on it. My fingers are still wet, so it doesn't really do me any good to brush them off. We will get these ready for stage 3. Alright, so now we're down in the basement again. When we go to stage 3 and 4, we will use a different drum, and that's largely just to prevent cross-contamination between the different types of grit. So I'm going to transfer these into one of our final polish drums. Now for step 3, we'll be using a 500 grit silicon carbide. It's a pre-polish. And it'll get 1 tablespoon per pound of rock, and as always we will assume that we have 3 pounds in here, so we'll get 3 tablespoons. And we'll fill that up to the top with water. And instead of this grit kind of looking like sand, it's more like a fine dust powder. Has a tendency to kind of get on everything. Get our lid seated in there. Squish out as much air as we possibly can. And stick our label on as per usual. And we'll see this in about a week. Alright, so we are at the end of the stage 3. We're going to go ahead and get this dumped out and rinsed off. Piece dried off here real quick. So that's how it looks when it's dry right now. It still has one final stage of polishing to go. Alright, so for our 4th stage on the Amethyst, I'm going to go ahead and add some ceramic media. It keeps the stones from knocking into each other too much. Just a little bit of cushion. And the ceramic media you can pick up the same place that you had ordered your grits from typically. Usually comes in either ceramic or you can get plastic. And then for the final polish we'll be using a 1200 fine grit aluminum oxide. And we'll put this in at a rate of 1.5 tablespoons per pound of rock. So we'll be putting 4.5 tablespoons in. And just as before, we will be adding water to the top of this. Get our lid seated. As always, we'll get our label on here so we don't lose track of what we have in here or where we're at in the process of tumbling. We'll let this go for several days. Alright, so we are finally at the end of the 4th week of tumbling with our amethyst. Go ahead and get this cleaned off and see how it looks. Off real quick while the camera's panning that, and we will leave you with a few photos, just still shots of these with decent lighting instead of the shadowing, without the ceramic media. So there's a piece that's all nice and dried off. It still retains that nice shine to it. If you like this video, make sure you click that like button. Click subscribe to see any other future tumbles that we do, as well as any other items we decide to put on this channel. And thanks for watching.